Good evening. Welcome to the Design Review Board meeting of March 13th, 2005. The time is now 5:09 p.m. The DRB meeting is now called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves during the meeting, and please turn off your cell phones at this time or silent them. This meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV 2, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 21, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed on the city webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, and on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, iOS, and Android devices using a free app called Cablecast and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. Staff will be submitting questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current DRB agenda and staff reports are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Record of decisions for all projects will be posted online on the Planning Division's website. Please note that any appeal of a case heard today must be filed within 15 calendar days of the DRB's decision date. The appeal application is available online at glendalepermits.com. And this will be roll call. Board Member Lockhart, I see being absent. Board Member Simonian?
Present.
Board Member Halajian?
Present.
Board Member Welsh?
Present.
And Mr. Chair Koskanian.
Present.
Reports regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the March 13, 2025 regular meeting of the Glendale Design Review Board was posted on the city's website on March 6, 2025, and on the bulletin board outside City Hall on March 10, 2025. Next, approval of minutes. I do see there's approval minutes from previous meetings for January 23rd, February 13th, and February 27th. Do we have any comments or do we have any motion regarding to the approvals?
Since I was the only one at all three of them, I'll move to adopt all three of the minutes.
Okay.
We can do it as a single motion.
Okay. And I don't think we need a second, so I'm just going to continue with roll call here. Board Member Simonian?
Yes.
Board Member Halajian?
Yes.
Board Member Welsh?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair Koskanian?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Moving on to oral communications. Discussions is limited to an item not part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Design Review Board may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. Do we have any speaker cards for oral communications?
Nope.
Very good. Board and commission member comments. Do we have any comments this evening? Seeing there's none, we're going to move forward. And since there's no old business, we're going to jump straight into new business here, which we only have one item this evening. It's regards to a project at 117 to 121 East Fairview Avenue. And since I'm the case planner, just give me a couple seconds here and I'll pull it up on the screen and I'll start the presentation. So as mentioned before, the project is located at 117-121 East Fairview Avenue. At a very high level, it's in regards to a construction of a 5-story, 36-unit residential project, which has a affordable component, which in the previously there was a density bonus and housing plan that was approved earlier in 2024. And I will go over in a brief high overview of the flow of this presentation. I'm going to go over the site location map, the past history, the existing conditions, and staff's analysis of the demolition, and then as normal for design review, the site planning, mass and scale, and then design and details. Moving forward, the location map. The subject property is approximately 18,000 square feet. It's zone R1250, which is high-density residential zone. As you can see on this map here, it is located north of the 134, and surrounding of the project is the Coffee Bean and Trader Joe's to the south, and St. Mark's to the north. Adjacent to the west is Citizens Bank, and then a multifamily to the east, directly to the east. And in a project summary, this is the scope of work is they're going to be demoing the entire site, they're going to clear the site, and they're going to be constructing the five-story, 36-unit multifamily building that's approximately 40,000 square feet. It will include a 2-level subterranean garage with 45 spaces, 43 of them being directly accessible, 2 of them will be tandem. And I'll go into further detail of the project's details in later slides. As I mentioned before, this project did have active and pending approvals. In 2004, there was a density bonus and housing plan that was approved. It was a request for a 50% density bonus, which included 3 very low income units, and then also a second density bonus, which a 32.5 additional density bonus was also on top of that, which included 2 moderate income units. The project included 3 concessions, which were to increase the height of the building, where 3 stories, 36 feet is allowed by code, but it's being increased to 5 stories, 61 feet. The FAR is being increased to 2.2. By the zone, it's 1.2. And then they requested, a concession, the third concession would be for common outdoor space to decrease it. The code requires 6,650 square feet. They're providing to 3,220. And on the second item here, as you see, it's the alley vacation of Alley 130. During October of 2024, an alley vacation was presented before the Planning Commission to vacate the adjacent alley to the subject property, which is a 15-foot alley that will be divided, split down the middle, where 7.5 feet will go to the subject property, 7.5 feet will be going to the commercial property to the west. The Planning Commission did recommend moving forward with the City Council with general plan consistency for the project. The next step for this is Public Works to take this to the City Council for a final alley vacation. And I believe that's tentatively for April. As I mentioned before, the site is developed with 6 existing units constructed circa 1911, 1922, 1923, and 1924. The project proposes to clear the entire site. A historical assessment report was prepared by Saphos Environmental. At a very high level, the report found that the property was substantially altered and lacked cohesion of design due to construction alterations that were viewed on the site. And as part of the density bonus application that was approved in 2024, staff exempted this from CEQA under Class 3-2, which is the infill exemption, and filed a notice of exemption with a state site, Sequanet, and also the LA County in 2024 for this infill exemption. Jay Platsy's Historic Preservation Officer will be available for any after the presentation and public comment to address any questions in regards to any questions regards to the historic report or staff's analysis. Moving on to site planning on the screen here, you see that on the left-hand side, this is the existing site plan with the 7 existing units. And on the right is the proposed site plan. As you can see here, more or less, the building will follow the rectangular shape with also some carve-outs for the common outdoor space, balconies, and circulation and setbacks. From the street, the building will be set back at minimum 21 feet and will average 27 feet. Staff feels this is compatible with the adjacent properties, as the commercial property to the west has a 0 setback, and that's kind of nestled into the Fairview Brand Boulevard intersection. And to the direct and adjacent to the east is multifamily development, which has an approximate setback of 15 feet. So with the proposed 21 minimum and average 27 from the street, staff feels this is compatible with the adjacent neighborhood and properties. The project will include approximately combined, common outdoor space and additional common outdoor space, about approximately 4,500. Previously, before I talked about the reduction of, that was just common outdoor space. So in conjunction with their common outdoor space and additional outdoor space, they're providing 4,500 square feet. As you can tell on this plan here, you can see that most of the amenities are on the the west side of the property. Staff recognizes that there is some constraints on the northern yard, as they're including the northern yard as part of their common outdoor space. But staff recommends that the northern area, you can see here, it would just be enhanced with usable areas such as like seating or maybe a barbecue area, a dog run, or something that can provide additional amenities to the property, and using that common outdoor space into something more usable, being that it's approximately set back 16 feet in that area. Moving on to mass and scale. The subject property is surrounded by 1- and 2-story commercial and multifamily units. While the project will be larger than the adjacent development, the project does incorporate a variety of architectural strategies that reduce the building's bulk, such as step backs and elevations, recessed balconies, Juliet balconies, and a variety of roof designs, as you can see on these slides, such as a gabled, a hipped, a flat roof, and it varies in heights as viewed from the interior elevations. And further, the building setbacks from the interiors will be 14 feet from the east, 16 feet from the north, and approximately 14 feet from the west, which that would be the commercial property. Overall, for design and detail, staff feels the materials incorporated in the design are appropriate for the desired style, which will include smooth plaster, fabric awnings, metal gutters, metal railings at the balcony, and decorative tile around entryways on the ground floor. Staff recommends, however, some recommendations as far as when it comes to design and detailing, such as in lieu of the S-tiles, staff recommends a half barrel or barrel tile to complement the tile caps that are shown on these elevations at the parapet area. The project does propose a combination of horizontal sliding, double hung casement and fixed windows with a 3/2 grid pattern constructed in vinyl in a bronze color. While the plans don't indicate the window placement, staff does recommend that these windows be recessed into the wall, either like with a block frame or recessed nail-on. That would be more aligned aligned with how it's depicted on the elevations and the renderings with a recessed placement. Moving forward, in regards to landscaping, a variety of moderate and low water California-friendly plants are provided, such as, but not limited to, strawberry trees, sweet bay trees, blue flame agave, kangaroo paws, breeze mat rush, and deer grass. Staff feels the proposed landscaping complements the design of the building and is appropriate. Overall, staff recommends approval of the project with the following conditions. Would the chair like for me to just kind of briefly go over the 3 conditions that we had summarized?
Sure. Yep.
So the first one is the common outdoor space in the northern interior yard to be enhanced with the usable amenities to improve the overall quality. As you recall in the site plan, I did have that red dotted area just to improve that area with the 16-foot setback. The second one, as I just mentioned on the previous 2 slides, it's just calling out for the windows to have details to be recessed with sills and the stucco bullnose around to avoid like a flat monotonous surface wall in the elevation, and to match the aesthetics shown on the elevations as well as the renderings. And additionally, I didn't mention this during the presentation, but it is in the report where we are recommending in lieu of vinyl. Staff recommends of a high quality material such as fiberglass, and also have 3-dimensional grids. The grid pattern wasn't specified on the drawings. And the last one, it was just calling out for, while they are proposing S-tile, staff is recommending clay barrow tiles to be used to reinforce the Spanish-style design that the project is exhibiting, and to complement the half barrel tile caps that they show at at the parapet caps on the elevations. Before I conclude staff's presentation, staff did receive several public comments which have been forwarded to the board via email and also have been printed at the dais. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Does anyone have any questions for staff? No. Any questions? Do you have any questions? Okay, I'm good right now. All right, let's open it up to the public then. I have the applicant, Rodney Kahn. Thank you, Rodney. If you could please just say your name.
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, board members, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn, and my offices are located here in the city of Glendale. As staff has mentioned, our project is a density bonus housing project, and it consists of market rate units, moderate income affordable units, and very low income affordable units. Thank you. So all different income levels of housing that we all know we need in our city. Our project also, as pointed out, received an approved density bonus housing plan. Last year, the concessions have already been stated, and in return for those concessions, we're providing 5 affordable housing units. We are located in an area of the city, a high-density area of the city, that's excellent for this type of project. We're across the street from the Trader Joe's, we're near restaurants, we're near churches, all types of shop, all within walking distance. The other thing is we're also in close proximity to major public transit along Glen Oaks Boulevard and also along Brand Boulevard. So it's a great location for this type of housing. We actually have our architects here, which is RRM Design Group, designed what we feel is an outstanding project. It's more traditional style. We're not used to seeing that. We see a lot of contemporary or modern style buildings. This is more traditional. And we think that will fit in nicely with the fabric of this mixed-use neighborhood. I'd like to turn it over to our architect, Sarah Shelton, and she'll walk you through the design. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sarah Shelton, please. Thank you. And if you could say your name again for the mic.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Sarah Shelton. I'm the project architect with the applicant team and wanted to thank staff for your introduction of the project. So as mentioned, we wanted to take this opportunity to provide some additional context for the project design and give you some more context for the decisions that we made. As mentioned, we are located right next to Commercial Zone C3, which allows up to a 90-foot maximum height limit. We're also located across from that zone. So we feel that this project is, in that perfect transition zone between the high-density commercial service zone and the surrounding high-density residential zone. With this in mind, we chose to locate the courtyard to the west, adjacent to the commercial zone. We felt that this will help provide a buffer between any future developments on the commercial property, and we're also locating it here so that we can help consolidate the bulk of activity and life that might happen on this courtyard away from the preschool located to the north and away from the apartment complex located to the west. So this helps kind of ensure that sense of privacy for our neighbors. We also wanted to note that we are preserving and exceeding the minimum setbacks required by zoning, and we are keeping the ground floor tucked in on the sides to allow for more landscape screening. You'll see that where we have bedroom windows along the north and the west, we are trying to locate planters in front of those to help screen for privacy, especially on the ground floor, to our neighbors. We also wanted to note that we are locating the bulk of our utilities in the subterranean parking to try and maximize the usable outdoor space as much as possible and provide as many amenities as possible in the courtyard area. We did want to note as well that we are exceeding the parking requirement. We know that this is often a concern, so we wanted to kind of pay attention to this. From an architectural style perspective, we chose, as Rodney stated, to go with a more traditional style, a Spanish colonial style. We feel that this reads as very warm and light and help ties into the neighborhood. We also feel that this honors some of the surrounding context, such as the St. Mark's Church, along with a lot of the Spanish bungalows you'll find in surrounding neighborhoods. With this style, we are able to introduce a lot of kind of human scale design elements, especially at the ground floor. You'll see that we have a very open arcade where you enter the building, helping kind of the lobby area feel very open, but also providing a secure and private entrance for the residents. You'll see that, as mentioned, we're also stepping the 5th floor back, kind of decreasing the sense of mass from the ground level and articulating the roof kind of with varied forms. We have also thoughtfully integrated many traditional details, helping bring down the scale of the building. You'll see that we have integrated exposed rafter tails, fabric awnings, molded cornices at the balconies, wrought iron scrolls at the Juliet balconies, decorative wall tile caps, and decorative tile on the building. Looking at the detailing a little bit further, we did want to address some of the recommended conditions for the project. So as previously mentioned, we are trying to consolidate the kind of gathering space to that courtyard on the west. And so in doing so, we want to kind of preserve that northern open space as a quiet, screened landscape area to the preschool and limit kind of congregation there. So we ask that staff maybe reconsider this condition. We also, as stated, want to note that we are limited with what we can build here due to the overhead power pole that we have in this area and the access we're required to provide. Regarding the windows, we did want to note that it wasn't shown on the plans, but we are proposing recessed windows, so that is something we plan to provide with bullnose corners. And you'll see here, yeah, in this example, you can see some of the sloped sill plates, which help add that more traditional look. And we are planning on providing fully divided kind of 3D grills, not just the simulated lights. Our only request is that staff be open to vinyl windows. There are some very high quality vinyl windows, such as this one shown here, that we believe would meet the intent with the full divided lights. Fiberglass windows can often be double to triple the cost and can sometimes limit the available products, so we just want to be cognizant of that. Lastly, we wanted to touch briefly on the condition regarding the tile roofing. This is an image of a real-life example of the specified roof product. We chose a color that has a varied blend, and we feel that it reads very nicely from far away. This is an S-tile. We feel that the S-tile and the barrel tile will be hard to distinguish from the ground floor, but recognize staff's comment. And we do want to focus kind of our attention to providing a very high-quality, smooth stucco finish, as shown on the image in the right. And with that, we thank you for your review and consideration of these details.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the architect while she's already up here?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Where are the power poles in proximity to this site? You mentioned power poles. Are they on the west side of the alley?
They're on the west side of the alley as well as the north.
I see. And you had some thoughts as to why you did not want to amenitize the north setback, but I missed it. What were those thoughts again?
So there's a preschool directly behind us to the north with its playground facing the back of our property. So we had some concerns with kind of not wanting to have a lot of activity back there to keep as much privacy as possible for the preschool. We're limited in the screening we can provide because of the overhead power poles. So we can't have very tall, trees or anything back there. So we just kind of want to be sensitive to that area.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So, I don't know of very many five-story Spanish-style buildings. Did you have any buildings that you used as any kind of reference projects?
Yeah, so we have, let's see here. There are, well, this one is 3 stories. It has some portions that are 4 stories, not shown here. This is a building in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is known for, kind of Spanish colonial style, and has a lot of kind of beautiful examples that show what that can look like at that larger scale.
Okay. And I appreciate that you showed some of the details on the windows. It seemed to me that on the renderings that there were some multiple different kinds of window detailings. So could you describe some of the different ones that you might have besides that? Because some looked like they had slanted, sills. Some had like called out lintels. So if you could describe that a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, correct. We are proposing kind of multiple different styles of window detailing. They would all be recessed, but we're proposing, different trims and different headers to help kind of break up the fenestration patterning and, really make it read a little bit more articulated. So the some of the windows you're seeing on that south facade do have a sill as well as a curved eyebrow, which is similar to, let's see here. Oops. You can see let's see here, the sill in that example there. And then some of the windows have are more recessed, so it's hard to tell in this rendering, but on the northern portion of the site, we're thickening that wall, so some of those windows will read, you'll really see that recess, it'll be pronounced, and with those, we have the sloped sill to help kind of accentuate the shadows there.
But there's no intention to do any kind of raised surround on these, right? The idea is that, except for maybe some of these lintels that are being called out and sills, that most of the will be, a straight edge at the edges, correct?
At the sides,
At the
correct.
sides.
So we're proposing, a lot of sills and headers consistent with traditional detailing, but we don't have like jam trim.
Okay. And I think I had one more question, but I'll wait till later, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
One more question. The proposed landscaping on the north side, were there any dimensions on the buffer there? I guess my question really is the property north of you, is it a single-story property? Do you know
I
have enough?
believe so.
Right now, yeah, it's a preschool, and it's a single-story preschool. And so right now, it's just purely landscaping, just shrubs and trees, and no, I guess this gray area is this considered the common space? That gray area?
Yeah, so we have common landscape space that includes the kind of vegetated area. And then, the intent is for that to be, kind of a quiet screened area where you can, stand and talk and pass through, but you're not
Okay.
congregating.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, I do remember my question.
Yeah.
The material notes say that the windows would be painted. Is that the intent, to actually paint the windows, or you'd get
The intent
windows?
would be for integrated
Yeah, okay.
bronze, dark
Yeah,
bronze windows.
I would think that would be the case. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then we have the owner of the property, Randy Stevenson. Would you like to speak, Randy? No? Okay. All right, and then we have some more speaker cards. Francisca Smith, please.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Francisca. And if you could say your name for the mic, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Sorry. My name's Francesca Smith. Some of you may know me. I'm an architectural historian and was for the state and other agencies for about the last 40 years. I am a former DRB, proud DRB member. I wanted to note the address of this project. Not a big deal, but kind of a big deal, is incorrect. It's 117 through 123, and 123 is one of the bungalow buildings on the property. Just a minor point. My biggest point, I think you received, including my letter, at least 5 other letters regarding the issue of the property being historically significant, which would make it not exempt from CEQA because it would cause a substantial adverse change in the historical resource, which is considered a significant effect on the environment. I will skip ahead. You can't use Class 32 if it's a historic property. There are exceptions to the exemptions. To be significant, this would be as a multifamily residential property, using the context and themes from South Glendale. It's pre-war multifamily development. And in cases of like this, the city allows a certain amount of alterations, especially when a property is this early. I took a friend who's a Cultural Heritage Commissioner in Los Angeles, who knows Glendale very well. She lives in Los Feliz, and she's pretty hard to convince, and she immediately said she thought this was eligible for the Glendale Register. Also, my partner, who is notoriously hard to convince, agreed that it was obviously eligible. Under Criterion A, it's a unique and rare representation of the oldest known bungalow court in Glendale, having been constructed first in 1911. It is part of a streetcar suburb. On page, can't find what page it was, I have a diagram that shows it was 260 feet away from the streetcar that ran from, I think, 1904 to 1955 on Brand Avenue. The consultant who did the report, which is kind of, if you ask me, a little bit of a conflict of interest because she was chosen by the developer. She almost never finds a property in Glendale eligible. She recently did not find Glendale Garden Homes to be locally eligible, which staff disagreed with, and City Council therefore required preparation of an EIR for that project. I have no stake in this. I'm not for or against housing. I know we need it. In this case, it would be 36 units. There are now 9 naturally affordable units by my count, so the change would be 27 new units with only 3 very low income and 2 moderate income, so it's actually a net loss for affordable housing. I will push ahead that it's an intact instance of interrelated craftsman-style buildings that were built over 12 years, I think, set among mature trees. There was an oak tree that was removed in 2023. It's individually eligible as a parcel as a historic property on two different parcels. I noted that the other consultant, I'm not a consultant, I do this as a volunteer, said that the alterations that were made to the buildings, which are very, very exaggerated in the report, were outside of the period of significance. A period of significance is a term of art in historic preservation. Unless a building is historically significant, there is no period of significance. She didn't identify the period of significance, so nobody knows when that would have been. The streetcar figure is on page 10, sorry. She said it was not associated with important persons in Glendale. She did note that it was owned by E.F. Sanders, but she missed the fact that he was the secretary of the Chamber of Commerce. At the time, it was the fastest growing city in America. He did probably the best known pamphlet for Glendale. The city grew exponentially under his boosterism. A big part of Southern California growth is boosterism, the promise of the California dream, cheap real estate, and everybody can have an orange in the morning from their own tree. Courtyard apartments is how she identified it. Nowhere in the report does it mention bungalow courts, which is a big problem. She said that it's not significant. She didn't compare it to others. You guys got this printout. These are the three South Glendale craftsman-style bungalow courts that were identified in the South Glendale survey. The reason I printed or asked for these photos was because all of these have altered windows. The top one, which is the closest in age, has really inappropriate windows. It also has security doors, and the railings have been changed. The second one looks better from the street. It has a number of alterations, including to buildings. Some windows are infilled. And the third, all the windows that are visible from the street have been changed, and there are changes to the building. So her contention that there have been too many small changes over time doesn't actually make sense. I have no vested interest in this, other than that Glendale follow CEQA properly, and that in the future, hopefully, developers won't be hiring their own consultants. When I used to be a consultant, developers would say to me, "I don't like your answer." And I would say, "I'm very sorry." And then I would say, "You still have to pay me." And then I would say, "And it's unethical to look for another answer, but it's up to you." So a lot of the time, when I was hired by lawyers and developers, they didn't like my answer because my answer didn't have to do with who was paying the bill. I don't know how many of you have been there. I was really surprised. My 3 minutes. Thanks very much.
Thank
I
you.
was surprised at what a lovely bungalow court it is. And I hope you'll consider the fact that the historic evaluation was prepared in error, a lot of big errors. And I thank you. I'm available for any questions. I think I've told you everything I know, though.
Thank you, Francisca, I appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.
Thank you. All right, next we have Valerie. If you could please state your name for the mic, please. Thank you.
evening. My name is Valerie Wyke. I live in this neighborhood near the corner of Dryden and Louise. I've been in this neighborhood for very nearly 11 years, and I've seen a lot of changes going on in this neighborhood. As you pointed out, it's a high-density area. It has become even more of a high-density area, meaning that the traffic has increased greatly over the years. And while we're very, very grateful to have Trader Joe's and Walgreens and the Coffee Bean there, the fact remains that this has also brought a great deal of traffic into the area, and particularly on Fairview, as people are coming and going into the parking area, in and out, all day long, trying to get to Trader Joe's and to Walgreens and the Coffee Bean. I don't know if you're aware of this, but a woman was killed at the intersection. She was run over at the intersection of Fairview and Louise a number of years ago. And then, of course, with the introduction of the Glenmark Hotel just a few years ago, that, of course, has greatly increased traffic also in this neighborhood, because you have people coming to the Glenmark Hotel who don't want to pay the outrageous parking fees, and so they're driving around the neighborhood looking for places to park. And because people hold parties there and that sort of thing up on the roof, then you have more people coming out at night to their cars. They're drunk, they're loud, they're doing things maybe that they ought not to be doing, such as the drive-by shooting that occurred last year, July of last year, in front of the Glenmark Hotel. There was a drive-by shooting. Again, this has just increased the amount of traffic and people in the area who don't live there, but who are coming there for various reasons. And also last July, there was a woman who was hit. It was a hit and run at the corner of Louise and Dryden. My neighbors and I heard the woman's child witness this accident, and she was screaming so loudly that we all came running out of the building to see what had happened. And to see this poor woman sprawled in the street with her daughter screaming over her is something you just cannot unsee. And so my concern, while this project is quite beautiful, it's highly inappropriate for the area. Again, high density. We already have immense increased traffic, as I've just noted. I can tell you that on that part of Fairview, there is no building that even remotely looks like that. 5 stories. This is a monster building in comparison to the other apartment buildings that are in close proximity. And while this building is lovely, it would be much more appropriate in downtown Glendale, perhaps on the site of the old Sears building or somewhere like that. But in this
You
neighborhood,
could finish up your thought, please.
it is just going to bring even more problems. We already have dangerous traffic in this area, is my point. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your time. All right, next speaker we have is Sosi Simonian. If you could please say your name, Sosi, for the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Sophie Simonian, and I, just like the previous speaker, live in that neighborhood at Louise and Cameron. And my concern is the traffic that this building is going to create for us. Louise Street is one of the busiest streets in that area. I believe everyone uses that street to get to the freeways. And she mentioned the Trader Joe's and Walgreens being there. Everyone that comes out of that parking lot, although I know the city has put a sign saying no right turn, but everyone turns right. And I understand why, because if they turn left and to go to Brand, it's hard for them to make a left turn to go. There's no signal light there. And, you know, it's hard. And so I think these people that are eventually would move there would do the same thing. And that's my concern, is the traffic that it's going to create for that neighborhood. That street is very busy. I wish city would take a look at it or do something to help. It's, people just race down that street to get where they need to get, and I think they use it to get to the freeways more than they use Brand Boulevard or Central. That's all I have to say.
Thank you,
Thank
Sophie.
you for your time.
And I saw that sign the other day that you were showing by the Trader Joe's when you go out. It was no right turn, right?
Yes.
I thought the same thing too.
Yeah.
That sign was there. But yeah. All right. Do we have any callers?
Oh, we do not have any callers.
We do not have any callers. All right. Thank you. I wanted to open the opportunity for the applicant or architect. If there's anything you'd like to address, rebuttal during this time.
Once again, Rodney Kahn. A couple things. One is the city's Department of Housing reviews all the income levels for the tenants. So the speaker is wrong in that there is a net loss of affordable units on site. It's actually a substantial gain of affordable units on site. As it relates to parking concerns, I think our architect pointed out, we actually exceed the parking that's required for our project, so we have additional parking. In terms of the comments about the drive-by shootings or people being run over in the street, I'm not really sure how that relates to the design of the building. It sounds dramatic, but it doesn't really relate to what we're doing here today. A few other things to point out, just clarification on the project itself. To the north, we talked about what's going on there. If you look at it, it's actually a fire access around the building, so we can't put things on that paved area. And then we have a raised planter back there as well. So in terms of if we're going to start looking at how we could use that area, maybe possibly with some seating, but for the most part, it needs to have that access around it. And then the only way to put the planting there is in a planter. The last thing I wanted to bring up is for the S-tiles, there are different finishes. I know our architect showed you what it would look like there. There are different finishes that we could use that we really think looks good as well. And we can show you those as you deliberate. We have an email maybe we can send to you, Dennis, if you could pull it up.
Yeah.
And give you some options if you consider an S-tile as opposed to the barrel tile. That concludes our remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I also want to take the opportunity to invite Mr. J to also provide some comments.
Okay. How do I get rid of that?
Yeah, like I've never done that before.
Okay, I put together a few slides. I just want to start by mentioning, this light is terrible in here. There we go. F5. Dennis. Oh, enable, just enable, please. Yeah, that was giving me trouble before. Cool. Okay, start by saying,
you know, we have lots of these situations where there's, you know, a consultant on one side and someone testifying, or another consultant in some cases on the other side. I find over the years that I'm not agnostic. I have feelings based on what I see on the ground and what my research or the research I conduct to follow up on other people's research tells me. But Francesca Smith and I have agreed many times on projects, and we've disagreed many times. The developer's consultant, same thing. It can go both ways. In this case, I strongly believe this isn't a historic resource, and I'll show you the reasons why. But I think there's a lot of stretching of what's really on the ground when we're considering whether this is historic. The baseline, I'm sure most of you know, the baseline for what is historic is, in Glendale, is it eligible for the Glendale Register of Historic Resources? So that's kind of my threshold, using the criteria for designation. Because this area and this property hasn't been surveyed yet, we use, as Mrs. Smith did, we use the results from the South Glendale Historic Context and the South Glendale Historic Survey that were finalized the survey was finalized in 2019, the context a few years before that. We're just starting a survey of West Glendale, where this property is, this property is in East Glendale, on the east side of Brand. We're just starting that survey. We believe that the thresholds and methodology are largely going to be similar. They probably won't be the same for these areas because they're slightly different development patterns, but we're comfortable using those. We think it's appropriate, and I believe Mrs. Smith thinks it's appropriate also. So here's an aerial view of the site. There are a few different points I'll make. I'll try to be as quick as I can. The first is, this is not a bungalow court. This is a grouping of buildings constructed over a number of years. This is not the oldest bungalow court in the city by any means. And it's frustrating when I hear that coming from a consultant or a researcher who I respect, because that case cannot even be made, and I'll show you why. But first I want to just say what is traditionally seen as a bungalow court. So these are some examples that were in one of the handouts that you received. Bungalow courts are traditionally built at one time with repeated modules that are very similar from one bungalow to the next bungalow to the next bungalow. They're usually two-sided. There's usually a driveway, or even better, a walkway going through the center. And when you look at them in aerial view, they're very easy and distinctive and ready. You can recognize them. So these are a couple of examples that were identified. One as eligible, one not quite as eligible, but still of historical interest in the South Glendale survey. Here are a couple of others. In the aerial views in particular, you can see this regular approach to the layout. And so this is what we call a typology, and the typology is very distinctive of bungalow courts. Just coming back here, and it's a little hard to see because of the trees, but we don't have that repeated module. We don't have that sense that this was all built at the same time. So here's the Sanborn maps. Sanborn maps were done for fire insurance purposes. They're incredibly useful for us in doing our research into how cities developed. We have good Sanborn maps from several years in Glendale. The 1919 Sanborn map shows 4 structures, 4 buildings on the site. A single-family house in the lower corner, which is still there. It's called a dwelling. It's a single-family house. It is not a bungalow court. So we can't say this is the oldest bungalow court from 1911 because in 1919 it wasn't even a bungalow court. There's another structure here that was actually a laundry with a sleeping porch on the 2nd floor. So this was a 2-story structure. We don't know anything about this 1-story structure here because it was demolished at some point, probably in the 20s. And there was a garage here. Now that's very interesting. You know, we don't have a firm date for the garage. 1911 is an early date for a garage in anywhere in the country, but especially in Glendale. But by 1919, when this map was being prepared, we know there were garages peppered through South Glendale, through the area. Still, we were seeing stables, so it was kind of this transition period from using horses and carriages and cars. I do have a record from the county assessor from 1916 that identifies a garage. There's a confusing history to the garage, but I'm not going to get into that. That's a detail I don't know that matters. What's important is the footprint of the garage is pretty much the same from the 1919 Sanborn to the next Sanborn on the right, which shows the 1925 configuration of the site, which is very similar to the site we see today. So I highlighted these areas just to show the history of the site's development and how different it is from these bungalow courts that were built kind of at a single time, single contractor probably, single designer. So everything highlighted in red here is that original map we just saw. So I'm saying circa 1911. We know that it's not quite there, but the house was definitely 1911. The garage could be 1911. In the 20s, this is when the site developed kind of close to what we see today. So on the left-hand side, you see the 3 bungalows that are built in the Craftsman style. The house was built in the Craftsman style. Another unit was appended to the garage up at the top. A second unit was built next to that. And then the laundry and sleeping porch area was expanded with a 2-story addition. So it was already 2 stories in part. It had a 1-story section that was either built on top of or demolished, and a 2-story section was built. And then the top part of that bar on the right, that history is a little unclear based on the records that I have. But you can see the dates of even the bungalows, 1922, 1923, 1924. So these were built over time by the owner, Mr. Sanders, or Mr. Sanders. So these were built over time, not like a typical bungalow court. Now, it does have a feel. There's definitely a space in the middle. It's a cool site. I love this site. It's got a funkiness that came from later development more than from this original construction. But if you notice, in terms of just the integrity of the site, the house itself, the 1911 house, had 4 separate additions put on it in 1930, 31, and 1937. At a later date, there's a little gray box. We don't know when that was added. I'll show you a picture of that. And then at the top, there's the section of that narrow building on the right that we don't know exactly what happened with the top there, but it looks like it was in 2 different generations. So there's an addition to the addition, as best I can tell. Looking at the photos, here's the garage. This is the most intact, I think, building here, but it was originally called a garage and room. So it was definitely built for a car or 2 cars, maybe 4 cars, but the garage and room designation that comes from the assessor suggests that there was some other use here, maybe a workshop, maybe, I don't even want to guess, I don't know what it could be. But it's definitely an interesting structure. It also has a flat roof, which is unusual, but not unheard of at this time. Could it be 1911? We know there was a garage definitely by 1916, and obviously on the Sanborn, it's still there in 1919. This is the front house, the Craftsman house from 1911. It's completely altered. If this were an individual property surveyed under the South Glendale standards, it would be a non-historic building. The porch was infilled. That's a deal breaker for a historic Craftsman house. But not only is there that deal breaker, there are a ton of other things going on with all these other additions that I showed you in that diagram. On the left, you can see this very strange little structure that's on these massive concrete piers. And it's a very unusual thing going on here, because not only is there that structure with the piers, but on the left, there's a concrete beam, that's a heavy beam, also on these little round piers that stretches along the west side of the house. What is it there for? I don't know. Some owner at some point decided to make this kind of a South Seas kind of tiki kind of thing, as best we can tell from some of the design elements. It kind of looks like it never went forward, but there's definitely an attempt to kind of modernize this complex of buildings. And in the right-hand picture, you can see that this mystery building that we couldn't figure out what it was visiting was actually what looks like an aviary. If I'm right, it looks like there's a macaw or some colorful tropical bird in there. The 3 bungalows are in varying states of original condition. None of them are perfectly intact. 2 of them are pretty intact. This is the front bungalow facing the street. It had its roof line altered to create kind of a flat roof along the front edge. It had its porch removed and had this kind of extended flat roof over the entry. Had some framing added around the windows. Other windows have been changed, but as Mrs. Smith noted, window changes alone are not going to make something not necessarily historic. But when we're looking at properties from the 1920s, in the South Glendale survey, we look at them a little differently. We expect them to have a higher level of design for them to be significant than a truly early bungalow court. So if this were a 1911 bungalow court with alterations, I'd be like, I'm on it, we're together on this. But there are too many alterations on too many of these little buildings. This is the middle building, 117A. And you can see the porch is intact. The railing was added at a later date, maybe during this tiki period. There's some original wood windows. There are many original wood windows throughout the site, but there are also many non-original windows throughout the site. And then this is the last of the three. This is the most intact, the most historically intact. It has a few changes, but it's pretty close to what you would have seen in I think this one's 1922, if I remember, and maybe 23. But we have to look at the totality of the site when we're saying, is this a historic property? We're not looking at the individual buildings. They kind of add up, telling the story of whether the site itself is historic. These are the two bungalows at the back, one of which on the left is attached to the side of the garage, and one of which is on the right side of this picture. These were originally freestanding. They have gabled roofs, but during this kind of modernization, tiki-ization, groovification, it got this kind of 50s brise soleil, the kind of awning or the kind of canopy over the building. These multiple vertical columns. They removed the two original small porch covers that would have been there, and you can see the size of the concrete that would have shown there were two columns and probably a porch with a gable roof on it. And then this is that skinny building on the right side that grew over the years. So it started out as that laundry with a sleeping porch, and then it grew in several generations. I don't even know what to say about what is this. It's not something you would see in a bungalow court. Some bungalow courts do have two-story buildings, but they're always at the far end of the U. And then you'll have the little one-story bungalows stretching toward the street. So the point I want to make here is this is a real hodgepodge. It's changed a lot over the years. It was never a bungalow court in the way that we use that term as a typology. There may be some disagreement in the audience, but I strongly believe that. And then finally, there's the idea that this is associated with Eugene F. Sanders, who worked for the Chamber of Commerce in Glendale. And the argument is that he may have had some instrumental role in boosting Glendale to the point that our population skyrocketed during the 1920s. And I agree with what's written here. While it cannot be specifically proven that it was Sanders' exceptional ability as a booster that made Glendale the fastest growing city in America, he nonetheless must have been quite successful in that role. Everything I found in the historical record, he was the assistant secretary of the Chamber of Commerce. His main function was to build membership. That's what most of what you read about him talks about. But he was involved in the pamphlet, Glendale, the fastest growing city in America. It was the second version of such a pamphlet. There was another one that was written by a person who actually is well-known and famous and a significant historic figure in the LA area. And so there's these exaggerations and stretching, saying he was the leader of the chamber. Unless I missed something, he was the assistant secretary of the chamber. There was a president, there was the secretary. So these are the kinds of things where a thread kind of gets woven into a tapestry, and there's nothing to support that this person was significant or that the site, to me, is significant for its association with him. So, this is where I come down on it, and this is why we're here instead of staff looking at this project and saying, oh, wait a minute, we need to take this to HPC. There's a potential historic resource here. And I'm the first to say, I would love to live there. If I were younger, it would be so much fun to live in a place like this. And it is cool, but that doesn't mean it's meaningful. It doesn't mean it has this historical story to tell. And so that's why I strongly disagree with the findings that it's a historic resource.
Thank you, Jay. Does anyone have any questions for Jay?
I had one. So I visited the site before I got Ms. Smith's letter, and at the time, I was largely in alignment with you, Jay, that there was a lot of changes, that it didn't seem like a truly historic one. It didn't seem very well designed, in terms of being craftsmen. But I was struck by the rocks. There's a huge amount of rocks, river rocks and stuff like that. Is there anything you learned about that on the site?
No, I was struck by it too, and I was like, oh, I could use some of those in my yard. But yeah, it would be hard to tell. There's some concrete features inside the courtyard that don't look like they're from the 20s. It's just these kind of layerings of things that happened on the site. So yeah, I'd be guessing.
Okay,
Long story.
thank you.
Any other questions? Any other
I
questions?
have one question. The pictures that you showed us, Jay, are relatively new pictures, like recently taken, right? I just want to comment on the report that was prepared by the developer. It's dated October 26, 2022. Has anything changed since this report got prepared, or?
Not that I could tell. The photos in that report seem similar to what you see today. And, that date on her report is 2022, yeah.
Yes.
So,
The report that.
I was also at the site last year, I think, and I haven't seen many changes.
Okay.
But, yeah, it looks similar.
Jay, I have a quick question. Is there an area in Glendale where we see a majority? As I know you said South Glendale. I actually used to live in South Glendale in one of these bungalows, and it was, like you said, amazing time. But is there an area in Glendale where we see like a flux of these historic bungalow types, or is it just like spread out throughout the city?
They're mostly scattered. We still don't know all of the examples we'll find in East and West Glendale. As we get up to North Glendale, I don't know that we're going to find as many. We have different housing types up there. There's not a grouping, but there's, I think, 4 along Riverdale Avenue. And then there's 3, and there's there's a different kind of bungalow court where the bungalows got attached at some point. One of the ones in Mrs. Smith's photos is actually duplexes, then they have a space, and then a duplex. A lot of people still call those bungalow courts, even though that's technically not bungalows. But there's an amazing grouping in the 1100 block of East California. 3, just go up there, 3 amazing buildings that if anyone owns those, let's get them designated. They're incredible, and it's a fun grouping also. So, but yeah, otherwise they're kind of peppered around.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Smith, it's closed for the public. I appreciate it. No, sorry, right now we're done. I appreciate it, though. Thank you. Is there any other questions for Jay? Nope. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to close it out to the public, and then we're going to go into deliberation. Board Member Simonian, would you like to start?
Sure. I appreciate everyone taking the time to come out and give us background, both historically and also some of the specific issues in that neighborhood. We all live in Glendale, so it's good for us to understand the specifics of these areas.
Yep.
Also, I appreciate staff's great presentation and Mr. Platt's insight as well, because it certainly helps put things in context for us as we're assessing the project. In regards to our intent this evening, of course, is to discuss design, and the fact that it had gotten to this point and we had received the package, I assumed historic was not an issue. However, I did go and visit it as well, and I had similar thoughts as well. It seemed haphazardly renovated over the years, haphazardly evolved over the years. There wasn't a cohesive language to it. So I quickly put aside any thoughts and started concentrating on the design, which is kind of what we're here to assess. In regards to the density bonus project, of course, it's a state law, and applicant is providing the very low-income units and the moderate-income units, et cetera, and concessions were granted already by a previous hearing from the planning department. And when we look at the overall layout and configuration of the design, I do think it is well thought out. I do think it flows well. I do think it is a creative solution to an urban infill five-story building. It's not easy to design a five-story building, a multifamily building, in light of all the restrictions, et cetera. However, this one I feel as though does a good job for several reasons. One is the top story is undulated back, and so it does break up the mass. The use of the balconies along with the detailing, I think further break up the mass and the height. I think its south elevation facing Fairview is the most successful elevation, whereas in the elevation on the west lacks some of those details, and which I'll kind of speak to in a moment. But as far as the concessions that were granted, the common open area was one of the concessions in regards to a reduction, but they have still taken a very good attempt at amenitizing the west setback. So I was happy to see that. It does have some programmatic elements that I think are useful. We could certainly talk about the north setback and how it relates to its adjacency to the daycare center. However, I do think the west facade, the west setback is appropriately designed. In regards to staff's conditions, without really saying, without going into detail, I think just keeping things holistically, I would say an affordable project, I have hesitations in prescribing fiberglass windows to. I think there's a lot of nice vinyl windows that we've certainly approved in the past that could be utilized here with three-dimensional details to them. But I do think that west facade facing Brand can benefit from some of the details associated with the south facade, such as the lentils maybe that could be, the lentil detail that could be used in conjunction with some of the sill details that they have. It's probably a facade that will be visible, much, I wouldn't say much more, but more than the Fairview facade. So I do think it's important. And I would say if we are going to propose an upgrade to materials, such as a fiberglass window, that wouldn't be as beneficial to the overall look of the building if we just added some details on the west side and stayed with the vinyl windows. And that's kind of my mindset, is how can we integrate some of the details that they have on the south onto the west without really putting them through the hardship of fiberglass windows. As far as the roof material, on an affordable multifamily building, I'm okay with the S-tiles, and especially with some of the examples that they have illustrated. But I do think that the north setback can be amenitized with some simple things. The architect is very creative as to what you've done on the west side. I'm sure you could create some programmatic elements onto the north setback. But those are kind of my thoughts on design. In regards to the parking, it's state density laws. They are over-parking it. They're not even utilizing the serious concession associated with some of the newer state density bonus parking concessions. That said, they are over-parked, so I'm okay with that. As far as the alley vacation is concerned, of course, that's a separate issue, but it's an alley going to nowhere, and so it does make sense to utilize it to get a better project with more common open space, which they are doing. So overall, I think the curb appeal of the project is well thought out. I think the layout is well thought out, and perhaps modifying some of the staff recommended conditions to get this building just a little bit nicer on the west facade will help. So those were my thoughts, Mr. Chair. Of course, I'm sure we're going to have some discussions, and I'm available to discuss some details further.
Thank you. Member Blanch?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was going to reiterate again that, on the issues of, and this is mostly for the public who may be watching, that issues of the size, 5 stories, things like that, we don't have any discretion over those things. We really only have discretion over the design, site planning, massing scale, those issues that relate to that. Things that are dictated to us by the state, we have no control over. So that said, I'm going to move into my analysis of the project, and I concur in large part with Board Member Simonian. I think the design is very nicely done. I like the fact that it is Spanish style as opposed to a traditional modern box kind of thing that we see most of the time. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I see that you've done some of the details. And this kind of a project, this design, really lies in the details, in where you've done things. Things like just like the little clay pipes used as attic vents. Is an authentic kind of a detail. So by and large, I'm in support of that. I originally, when I looked at the site plan, I was all, shouldn't this be the mirror, that the east side would be where you'd have the amenities and stuff like that, keeping it away from the commercial uses? But I appreciate the explanation that I was given about keeping the noise and the impact away from the lower density, currently lower density units next to it. I would like to talk a little bit about some of these details where I do want to make a few points. I agree with Board Member Simonian. I am not fussy about the use of the vinyl windows. I'm much more keen on, in a particular design like this, making sure that the recesses are done better, because you can have fiberglass windows, you could have steel windows, but if they're flush mounted, it's going to look horrible. So I think that that's really where the effort needs to be put into the correct kind of detailing. So I appreciate hearing the explanation about the differences of the way you're doing the treatments of the different fenestrations. I think the hierarchy of the fenestration is also well done and well thought through. In terms of what to do on that west side, because I agree that west side will be visible. From Brand, from anyone walking on Brand, it's going to be quite visible. At least right now, there's a bank there with a big parking lot. So it's very visible from that side. The only thing I could suggest, because there's a language for the windows and which ones get lintels and things like that, and so it's really hard to apply that. So one thing I could say is, maybe where on some of them where you put a triple window above double windows on the lower stories, maybe on one of those banks of windows on the west side, you could do that. Maybe play around with it. Unless you start taking away the awnings, I'm not sure that you could do lintels effectively to really help break that up. I think the awnings actually help break it up better. I would note one thing, that I think that the entrance is not particularly prominent to me, and we always like to see the entranceway clearly articulated. And it kind of dovetails with another comment I had, which is that the uniformity of the color makes it appear a little bit bigger. And so what I was thinking of suggesting was that the base level walls maybe be a darker contrasting color, maybe even pull out elements of the first floor to give sort of a platform to the structure to create some contrast there that will help break up the verticalness of the mass. These are suggestions that I'm going to throw out there for deliberations with my fellow board members here. But that might also be one way that you can help articulate the entryway. I want to particularly point out there's a building just around the corner on Louise and whatever is that next street up. It's a historical building, but it has a very nicely done entryway with some detailing on it. So you might look at that as something to try to boost up the visibility of that entranceway and the prominence of that from the street. Aside from that, I really don't have very much to add. I personally would prefer the barrel tiles because I do think that they are much more genuine. I don't know if staff has gotten the email that was referenced earlier that we could look at what they're talking about. I think that might help our deliberations, but I personally do like that condition. And I think those are really my comments. Generally, I support the project, and I'm sure we can come up with a few conditions to see if we can help it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So overall, I'm in agreement with my fellow board members. I do support this project. I think it's going to be a great addition to the area, especially with the Trader Joe's there. I know like a lot of like younger people are going to want to, live around that area, just make it more convenient. Appreciate the good amount of parking that you all are providing. It's an ample amount, and I saw that it's also electric vehicle, which is an added bonus, especially because a lot of the apartment complexes within downtown Glendale unfortunately don't have a lot of electric vehicles charging, and it's a little bit hard, but thank you all so much for adding that addition. Like I said, overall, I think you all have done a great job with the design. I do like the Spanish style. I'm okay with the vinyl windows that you all have stated. I like the designs with the clay downspouts that you guys also included. I wish there was more room to include a little bit more open space. I do want to, I know we're deliberating on those points as something we could, modify. The north side, I don't believe it's right behind the school, if I'm not mistaken. I think the school is a little bit more diagonal. So if there are those opportunities for us to look into that, I think we should. But I do agree with Board Member Welsh in regards to the entryway. It looks like it's just like a little tiny area. So if we can make it a bit more prominent, I think that would be an added benefit. But overall, I'm in support of the project. And yeah, Board Member Halajan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do share a lot of the viewpoints that my colleagues shared here tonight. My initial reaction is let me start out with the windows, is the vinyl window. Maybe my colleagues can entertain the idea of having the facade, south elevation, that can be seen from the Fairview street. That could be maybe a fiberglass. Maybe we can entertain that idea. That would be the closest where this is a kind of a walking area. I'm fine with having vinyl elsewhere, especially when you're driving or walking on Brown. That's significant setback. It'll be very difficult to distinguish whether that's vinyl or else. But I do also agree with with Board Member Sinanian is we have to bring some of the details from the south elevation to west elevation. North side, yes, maybe we can amenitize that a little bit further. Right now, with the scale of the building and being on the north side, I'm not sure if that vegetation or landscaping is going to survive. It's going to see enough sunlight for it to survive, but that's just my opinion there. And the final comment that I have is the trees. I did spend some time there. I had the opportunity to walk around and just get a better feel of that area. The proposed boxes are 24-inch boxes, strawberry marina trees, and those are relatively slow growth trees. Especially the trees next to it are, established camphor or other types of trees. So maybe increasing the size of the tree box to at least 36 to make it kind of blend better. So those are the items that I would propose into consideration. But overall, the design is beautiful, nicely done. I like the fifth floor setback, as my colleague said. It's not easy to create this mass and, with 5-story Spanish style, but overall, it's a nice looking building. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can chime in, on the north side, I think Mr. Joe had suggested like a dog run, perhaps. That might be the lowest sort of use that would be an alternative and a nice amenity.
Yeah.
So I think we might consider, sort of sculpting it towards that. And then I forgot, I wanted to make one request for consideration about using some of those stones. I don't know if you guys noticed the proliferation of those stones, but if they could, I know that they called out for some in the landscape area in the front, but if they could figure out some way to repurpose some of those throughout, I think that would be a nod towards the history of the project. And I think that it would be, an interesting feature that could be incorporated. But I don't want to make it a condition, but I would like to put it forward as a consideration.
I did see some on landscape plan that they have boulders that they're bringing, so
Yeah,
maybe
a
that.
few in
that's
the
it.
front area,
That's
yeah,
right.
but I
So-
was hoping that they could incorporate it more into the
Absolutely.
rest of the common
Yeah.
areas.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Any thoughts about contrasting color at the base, or?
Yeah, I do think that if we differentiate the base, it'll certainly create a perception of a lower building. And I think that's a positive. And it will be easy to implement, especially with
Yeah, it's just
different
color
colors
change,
very easily, or a material they could choose. But that seems to be a very good idea. I do agree with your thoughts, Board Member Welsh, in that, the awnings coupled with the lintel details may, of course, that would be conflicting. So if they're doing some awnings on the west, on the smaller windows, perhaps at least they could follow the same detailing as the balconies and also the sliding door details on the west as well, instead of just the color band on the edge of the balcony. That would certainly give it more character. And as I had said earlier, I'm okay with the vinyl windows as the detail. So perhaps to start moving towards a motion, condition number 1 says the common open space area in the northern interior yard should be enhanced with usable amenities to improve the overall quality of the common open space for residents, and perhaps we could say, for example, a dog run, something to consider. I do concur with larger trees. Those are always nice, especially 36 inches. But in order for the 36-inch, they will need taller planters. So they'll need at least a 3-foot planter, if not something a little taller for the roots to work. But we could maybe make it a consideration to work with the landscape architect to try to get larger sized trees on the north setback, but working really in line with the amenitized package of a dog run in the north. Something of that nature, perhaps, for condition 1. Number 2 deals with the window details, and all the buildings should be recessed. I think we all concur on that. And I would suggest saying all the windows shall be detailed. The overall design language and details as depicted on the south facade shall be incorporated onto the west facade, and for applicant to work with staff to accomplish that goal.
You want to incorporate that into number 2?
Number 2, we're just talking about some suggestions for language at this point. Number 3, I'm open for discussion, but I'm okay with the S tiles. Perhaps adding a 4th condition, which would be applicant to work with staff to differentiate the base of the building, perhaps with a different color or a different material. And consideration to incorporate and repurpose some of the existing stones onto the landscaping. So those would be my thoughts.
And a consideration for the landscaping, for the trees? Is that consideration or condition?
We could make it a consideration, for them to work with staff on those, try to maximize the size of the trees on the north. So those would be my thoughts of a condition.
You could just do a friendly amendment to the one about the color to maybe use that also to help gain more prominence for the entranceway?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So does staff want to reiterate those conditions?
Yes, just, so for when I hear, for condition number 1, largely the same, but enhance it with something of a minor active use such as a dog run. On condition number 2, it seems to be consensus of keeping the recessed windows, but continuing the details on the windows and balconies shown on the south front facade and continuing that onto the western facade in terms of the color and the window and the balcony treatment, so it translates over.
So the detailing.
To the
translates over,
detailing,
yes.
correct. In regards to 3, I think we're still unresolved, but however, I did receive the product detail from the applicant, which I have on the screen, and it's a 28-page document. If we don't mind, maybe if we can open it, if the chair is open to, if the applicant would like to convey what they want to describe on this PDF they just sent me.
The image on the left is a nice product. Is that a S-style? If the architects are okay with that, we have a visual, we could go with that.
Commissioner Simonian, yes, that we wanted to illustrate, that's what we're looking at doing. We don't want you to go through the whole thing, but basically, it gives you a sense of, it's the S-tile, gives that look, it gives that impression. It's a rich look as well. I wouldn't say richer, but
What's nice about the top left one is there's variety, so it actually has a more authentic look to it, whereas in the ones on the right could be more monotonous, especially with the size of the building. So-
Yeah, a variegated look is definitely very good. Can you scroll down to the next image, Dennis?
Mr. Joe, can you scroll down a bit?
Sure.
Just to see what that bottom,
page 3 is where you want to go. Or, I'm sorry. There you go.
see, everything at top would be too monotonous.
Right.
Same with the bottom,
Just like the second row.
second or third row. And from the third row, maybe the left or right, the
Yeah,
two on the right.
left or right.
Yeah,
We were looking at either the vintage or the fume.
yeah. Is everybody okay with the fume?
I prefer the Aneja, but.
You like the Aneja?
I mean, I don't want to
I'm
be
okay
very
with either
prescriptive here,
of
but
those
yeah,
vintage
I'd prefer either the Aneja or the
row.
Fume.
So either the Nea or the Fume is what yours?
What
Yeah,
if we say
aged
the
finish.
Anejo or the fume
Aged
based
finish?
on availability?
Okay, yeah. I mean,
Works for us. With the aged, yeah.
The aged reds, yes. Continuing with the conditions I've heard, an added fourth condition would be to integrate or differentiate the base with either a color or introduce a separate material and accentuate the front entry in a sense, but of course I can go back to the language, but in a sense was to help reduce the mass by differentiating in
creating
the
like a darker,
reduce the
earthier
verticality.
tone, to contrast with the white of the building.
And allow the applicant to work with staff. I would like to ask the board if, because usually when I see there's a contrast, I'm looking for a datum line or a transition piece for that color they would like to introduce like a, maybe,
Well, I would suggest that on the balconies, there was a color that was used on the balconies that could be pulled and used to repeat that and echo that same color. That would probably be the easiest reference to give them. Something like that, or the lintels, something like that, something that can echo something in the building.
okay. And I have two added considerations, which would be to work with staff to integrate larger trees at the north interior yard. And also a second consideration to repurpose the existing rocks into the landscaping design towards the front.
Well, throughout the project. right?
Throughout the project, okay.
Wherever they could.
Okay.
So one clarification, Mr. Joe, in regards to condition number 2, the last sentence,
Strike the fiberglass.
right.
Yeah.
right,
Yes.
Just so we're
think
consistent.
we have
If
consensus.
everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, I think consistency throughout the project is probably better, and final windows, I'm sure they can find decent quality if they're, done well.
Thank you for that clarification, yeah.
Yeah, as long as it's integrated color and not painted on.
Exactly, integrated
Yeah,
color, yes, of
yeah.
course.
That will peel off.
So I guess that we're saying to remove condition number 3 then? The S-tile, barrel tile?
We could reference
Yep.
the material board as depicted on, as presented
Okay,
on condition number 3.
so change it
Staff
to,
will draft it to integrate one of the aged reds type of tiles, which would be a Neha vintage or fume or similar type, if availability is not available during the time, but we could definitely reference this.
okay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
And then did we get the considerations as well that we had with the existing rocks on the property?
Yes.
Okay.
He did.
Yes, I do have that as a second consideration. The first one I have, larger than 24-inch box trees, perhaps maybe 36-inch box trees at the north interior yard. And the second one would be to repurpose or integrate the existing rocks, and that would be throughout the property of the landscape design.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'll move it.
Okay, so I have a motion by Board Member Welsh. Do I have a second?
All second?
Okay, I have a second by Board Member Simonian. This will be roll call. Board Member Halajian.
Yes.
Board Member Simonian.
Yes.
Board Member Welsh.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair Kaskanian.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn.
So,
Was there more business?
no, the community development has no departments, and I just wanted to say at the time of the adjournment, as motioned by Board Member Welsh, the time is 6:42 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.